We are live. Welcome to another episode of Unscripted, and I have the great pleasure to introduce Jothi Dugar, the Chaos Guru. Thanks very much, Jothi, for joining me today. Much appreciated. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. Happy New Year, and I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I don't even know where to get started. I love your background, and we got connected, recommended we have this conversation today. And maybe you can help me out and just give me a kind of a walk through memory lane and how you started, how you got into the tech, and then how you got into having your own podcast and some of the things you advocate for.
Sure. I started in cybersecurity 20 years ago, and a lot of people ask me, well, did you start working when you were 10? I'm like, no, it wasn't exactly 10, but it was probably 12, which is actually, it is true. I joined there was a military program at high school that I joined, not necessarily in cyber because it didn't exist back then, but it was actually when the internet first came out. I was right there, and we were actually doing research on the different search engines back then. It was like Lycos and Yahoo and, things that really don't exist anymore in this day and age. But I've always been excited about IT and technology in general. I did electrical engineering in college, and I was trying to look at cyber options. Again, they didn't exist. The closest I got was networking, which didn't really excite me too much. And then I graduated. I traveled the world for 6 years. I did all kinds of things, training, different parts in technology. And my old boss, I still remember this, he said, there's something called cybersecurity out there, and there's a training program. Like, you might want to just give it a shot. And sounds like something that would really be good for you, because I was really good at problem solving. I liked solving problems, and I didn't really, I was never really cut out to be the person to go to a position where you just do the same thing every day. So this sounded exciting. So I jumped in, I got my certification. I think it was a GSEC certification about 20 years ago. And I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot, maybe do it for a couple years, and then I'll move on to something else. But I think once you get in, it's impossible to leave the cybersecurity world because it's just so fascinating. And it's growing by the day. It's never going away at this point in time. It's only going to get more expansive. And I feel like that's the beauty of the field, that there's just so much you can do in the field. And me being a woman and a minority, I must say it wasn't always easy and it wasn't always fun, because you're one of the few. I'm glad that dynamic is changing in the current day and time. Maybe not as fast as I'd like, but at least it is changing. So I'll stop there. There's a lot I could add in terms of just diversity and empowering women to be in fields where there is a lot of male domination.
Absolutely. So why don't we just double click on a couple of things? What do you think that in terms of your upbringing, that you were attracted to kind of the technical field? As you mentioned, you were always a good problem solver. I personally struggle sometimes with raising two young boys, and how to solve problems, because the education systems today seems to be able to teach you a predefined set of problems and how to solve those, but not like the kind of the chaos that's in real life in the workplace in terms of problem solving. So if you don't mind, can you share some of your experiences in terms of maybe your parents, maybe some role models, whatever else you can share with us? That'd be great.
Sure. So I'll actually get personal on this. I was the only child. My parents brought me here when I was 1, so I was pretty much raised in the U.S. and in Maryland, and I had a pretty traumatic childhood, to say the least. So I had to start problem solving when I was 5 years old, just to figure out, okay, how do I survive this type of environment? I had to be really strategic. I couldn't just be a kid. Pretty much my whole childhood. I almost had to act and think as an adult, even as a child, and figure out, okay, what is my strategy? When do I ask the questions? What is the right questions to ask? How do I not put myself in the line of fire, or, quote unquote. So I really had to figure out how to get myself into a safe situation, but also figure out what's the best tactics I could use pretty much as a child. And I took that with me pretty much my whole life and even up to today. So I totally understand. I have three kids of my own. I'm also a single mom, and a lot of times every child is different. So I was also an engineer, so were my parents. So that also helped out because I always thought like an engineer. There was never a situation where I encountered in my life where I just thought of myself as a victim and stayed in that mode. I might have thought of myself as a victim for a short period of time, but then I always try to just move past that or move through it and then get out of it and then figure out, okay, what do I need to do to solve this problem and learn those lessons and move on. And I think in cyber, that's all cyber is. It's like, right? It's like solving problems, figuring out the root cause of the problem, and then fixing that, and then looking at the lessons learned, and then trying not to make those same mistakes again. And I think that's what I teach my kids up to today too. I have a 12, 9, and 6-year old. And whenever they come to me with a problem, I don't try to solve it for them. I just offer some empathy and I ask them, okay, well, how are you planning to solve this? What are your ideas? And I think, like you said, the schools don't necessarily teach them in that way. Or they just give them very limited options, or they say just go to an adult. And I try my best. I have two girls and one son, and especially for my girls, I tell them, like, you can't keep going to other people to solve your own problems. You have to be able to solve them on your own, and you're gonna fail in things, and that's okay. Because that's the number one thing that I learned in my childhood is in spite of my parents, like, where you're looked at, especially in the Indian community, if don't get a 4.0 average, you're considered kind of a failure. And what I learned from that is, well, that's first of all, it's a lot of pressure, and especially if you're doing a whole lot of other activities. And who's thinking of you as a failure? Is it society? Is it your parents? Is it culture? And is it truly a failure? Because you can only learn when you quote unquote fail. Otherwise you really have no opportunity to grow and evolve and realize that, oh, you could have done something better, or you could have done something differently. So I tell my kids all the time that if you don't have to be perfect at everything. In fact, that doesn't even exist. And if you quote unquote fail, it's okay, because look at it as failing forward. As long as you're learning your lessons, and you take those lessons and just look forward and move in the right direction, versus always looking back and trying to figure out what you did wrong.
And Jothi, I'm listening to you, and I'm trying to have all my thoughts in order, because there's so much you pack into a short amount of time. And if you don't mind, let me ask you a couple more questions, specifically what you just mentioned. So what I hear from you is that you had to battle like an external environment, whether it's some sort of conceptions of what you're supposed to do, with traditional Indian family. We talk about the female role. We talk about, male-dominated roles. And you had to figure a lot of it stuff on your own, while you're doing it. It's like on the job training on all fronts. Can you just dig again into your background and find maybe some defining moments that you realize, maybe even if I don't get a 4.0 GPA, I'm still not a failure. Maybe if I do choose a STEM discipline and go after it, I'm still not a failure. Maybe if I'm not traditional in the sense of the world, maybe I'm still not a failure. Where in that journey that you started to define what success is for your own self?
Sure. I've had 3 points in my life that I would consider transformational. One when I graduated college, and then I left my parents' house, and I had about 10 offers lined up for me, government, private sector, you name it. And it was the best year to graduate. It was the year of 2000, right before the dot-com hit. So all the companies were offering, sign-on bonuses and everything. So I actually took a position with Capgemini Ernst and Young, and I got to live in Europe for about 2.5 years, which was wonderful. It just really opened my eyes to different cultures, different ways of doing things, different people. And then I traveled all of the U.S. I joined Northrop Grumman, so I did a lot of traveling in the first 5 to 6 years of my full-time career. Like I said, I was still working through high school and college as well, but this was starting my full-time career. And that really opened up my eyes to just different ways and different perspectives, because living in America throughout my childhood, you get used to one type or one set of opinions and culture and society, and then you start exploring other cultures and other countries, and I really learned, like, oh well, you don't have to work 24/7 and live your job and have your job be your life. Like, you can also be yourself, like, you be your authentic self, and find out like what makes you happy and take time to do that, like self-care. And that really leads to my next journey into wellness. I have 3 kids, and after my third baby, I was given 6 weeks to live because of an incompetent OB that botched my entire C-section. And that was my next transformational point, where I had to figure out, okay, how do I survive? Because I didn't want to put myself into the hands of Western medical doctors and surgeons, in order for me to heal myself. So I actually found a whole world of natural and alternative medicines and therapies and modalities, and I actually was able to heal myself naturally. It took me 3 years, but I was able to do it, and then I started learning all of these modalities and started my own wellness practice, and I'm also a wellness coach now, and I started bringing that into my work, especially in cybersecurity and technology, because I noticed that there's a lot of burnout and stress and overwhelm in technology, especially if you take the leadership route, because not only are you managing technologies, but you're also managing people, and that can be very stressful. So I started my own health and wellness practice, or actually a program at my current organization. It was the first health and wellness program for technology, and it was a huge success. Then I also started a coaching practice as well. So I try to, bring out. I've learned to bring out my own authenticity and bring all parts of me to the table and try to merge them together, which has been great. So a lot of my talks, and my whole podcast is called Wellness for Tech. It's really trying to blend the wellness world with the technology world, and help technology leaders lead well from within.
And we'll definitely dive into that, because I have a few questions in regards to that. Again, from talking to you, I hear that through adversity, I would say, you grew and you learned and you developed and you embraced that to become better and reinvent yourself on different levels. How do you do that? Is there any way we can do that collectively now without going through it? Meaning, for example, you said that you have 3 kids and you're trying to teach them to be better, and you say, okay, go ahead and try to solve it on your own, because there may not be somebody there to help you. But potentially it's hard to learn from other people's experiences. How do you replicate what without actually having to go through all those adversities, and kind of instill that tenacity? It's almost like the Hormesis principle, right? So what doesn't kill you make you a little stronger. So you had to go through that, and you came out stronger on the other side. But is there any way we can take the younger generation, because we are very protective today? This society is very protective. We don't allow our kids to experience anything. Even in the playground, I see like they're all like, almost synthetic. We don't allow them to get scratched. What's your opinion on that? As a again, as a health coach, as somebody who's gone through it and redeveloped themselves.
It is definitely challenging, and the culture is very different than when I grew up. A lot more complicated as well. You know, there wasn't social media and all of this technology that exists today, or even like cyberbullying or even just normal bullying, and to the extent that it is today. So it's definitely challenging, and I could see it in my own kids as well. They also have a very heightened sense of entitlement, especially if you have you know if you live in a decent area and you're going to a good school. There's it's like keeping up with the Joneses feeling as a family, and it's hard as a parent not get engrossed into that mindset. Oh, this other person bought their kid an iPhone, whatever latest model there is, and Mike is like, oh, can I have that too? I'm like, you have a phone that works. That's all you need. Like, you don't need the latest technology. Being a child, and I think it's having crucial conversations with your kids. Is important. Just the same way that you would have a crucial conversation with your colleagues or the people that work for you or the people that you work for. I treat my children sometimes pretty much similar to a work setting. If you're the leader of the family, it's your responsibility to inspire those that work for you and that work with you. Now, me being a single parent, I feel like there's a lot of pressure there to have these conversations with your kids and let them know, like, look, this is what I'm willing to do for you. And these are just some of these other things that they always ask for are just their wants, they're not needs. And there's a limited amount of wants that I can afford to get for you and that I want to get for you. And then have them, I set up an allowance system for them. And like, if you want to buy something for yourself, you could, you can work your way towards that. But then you also have to think, like, do I spend it on this, or do I save it and then, invest it? I also teach them about stock markets and investing. Do you want to go for the instant gratification, or do you want to grow your money and you could buy something even better later on, or not even buy it? You could just invest it and have more of an experience. So I think it all comes down to setting the expectations for your kids, depending on the age. Like, my youngest is almost about to be 6, and I started having conversations with her even when she was 4, and just trying to get the kids to understand that the instant gratification only lasts for so long. 2 weeks from now, you're going to look at these toys and it's going to be on the floor somewhere. Half the parts are going to be missing. You're not really going to care about it. But the part that you asked, going back to, how do you really, the protection it can start, there's a lot of judgment as well, in the parenting community. Like, if you're the parent that lets your kids fall off the monkey bars, and so they learn, right? Oh, well, but it's not a failure. It's like, okay, you're gonna have, you should be prepared to fall in playgrounds. That's just that's just natural consequences. And it's not necessarily bad consequences, right? Oh, you fell off the monkey bars because, maybe your hands are too slippery. Okay, well, let's try again. Maybe take off your gloves this time. So it's also how the parents react to their children when things like that happen. And I know all too well, sometimes you go there and the moment somebody falls, like, the parents are rushing after them. I'm like, it's just a scratch. Like, it's fine. And I think when your kids see that you're not reacting like that, in fact, I encourage them, like, oh, good job. Like, that was a great fall. Now pick yourself back up and try again. And you don't make it a big deal, then they kind of learn, oh, okay. My son does that all the time. He would be bleeding and he would just be like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go back and play there. I'm like, okay, let's just clean this up first and then you can go. But if you don't establish things like that and you're too worried about what other parents think of you, or or you're different than how other parents might handle it, then I think that's where sometimes you get caught into the whole rigmarole of keeping up with the Joneses feeling.
And again, if I hope you enjoyed having this conversation because it's really intriguing to me because do you feel that we can win that battle because we only have fairly limited time with the kids? Unfortunately, we're working parents. They spend a lot of time in school and systems that we don't have access to, which instills potentially some other types of rules and rule sets. I'll give an example. Like, it's all about fairness. Sharing is caring. It's very synthetic. And then you go into the real world. Nobody gives you the car because they feel, oh, we need to share it. And then in the workplace, you know how it is, especially being a woman minority. Sometimes you had to, use your elbows to get ahead in the corporate world. And it's just how it is. Not just women, just, everybody has to do that. So do you find that we are in constant battle between what we're trying to teach our kids and still in them and what the society currently is telling them? And maybe that's why I don't know if you've had a chance to work with younger folks, but that sense of entitlement actually is carried over from what you just described to the workplace. A lot of them feel that they're
Yep.
doing some work is beneath them and they should have like some other more meaningful work. But sometimes unfortunately not everybody can do meaningful work. I just wanted, and I kind of blubbering away, but I would love to get your sense of it and what you're saying and potentially how we can collectively win this.
Sure. I mean, me personally, I believe in walking the talk. So, and kids these days are very smart. They'll catch you in a matter of seconds if you say something and then you do something totally opposite. Like, hey, well, you said not to do, So I try my best. So this is how I think of myself. So I'm an executive in my workplace, and I also consider myself an executive in my home place. So as an executive, you're being watched at all times at work, right? Whatever you say, whatever you wear, your hairstyle, like what you eat,
And Jothi,
who you talk to.
it's not what you say, it's what you do. I think that's really matters, especially in the workplace and at home.
Yeah, and both, right? If you say something and you do something opposite, or if you say something and you don't do it, and then, people will consider, oh, she's just all talk and, she's not really going to follow through. And exactly, it's the same kind of concepts apply in your home setting, especially as a parent, because you are the leader of your family. And so I try my best, I may not succeed 100% of the time, but when you don't, or when I don't, then I take that opportunity to go back to my kids, or maybe it only affected one kid, but all the other kids are watching how you handle every situation. My oldest is 12. She just turned 12 now, and she's a preteen that thinks that she knows, she's going to conquer the world, and she may, but she thinks she's learned everything in life, and she's so much smarter than everybody else, especially her parents. And I get that, and so I have to use a different strategy in working with her than with my other two. But the same concepts apply to the workplace, right? Every person is different. You can't use the same strategy just to work with like everyone, even your subordinates that work with you. So I do assessments at work, like personality assessments and things like that, because it's important. They don't define you, but they're a part of you, and it's important for leaders to understand. Okay, every person learns differently. Every person has their own traits and personalities and experiences and skill sets, and you can't just say, well, this is the rule that applies to everyone and you have to do it the exact same way that I told you. So I really try to keep my authentic self in my work setting and also in my personal settings, especially with the children, because that helps me be the same person instead of like, oh, I'm a totally different person at work and I'm a totally different person at home. But again, it's walking the talk. It's also having these conversations with each of your children figuring out what are their pain points, like what are they going through, how can you help them the same way you would have conversations with your employees, how can you help them grow, and then also take ownership of or an accountability for themselves and not be afraid to tell you when they did something wrong. um, that's not to say there aren't consequences, but a consequence is different from a punishment, in my opinion. Like you wouldn't give a punishment to an employee there, but there would be consequences for bad conduct or bad performance. So we actually established something called a most helpful person methodology in the house, and whoever wins that, gets an extra something extra in the week, and they love that concept because they and it's the same way at work. Like you get a certain salary for doing a certain job, but then no one is paying you to come back home and take care of your kids. Like you don't get paid for that. So I told them, like, okay, so if you do X, Y, and Z things, like you'll get a certain allowance, but then there are things that you're gonna have to do, like chores and jobs, just for having a home to live in, that's safe and secure. And they didn't understand that at first. Like, well, wait, so we have to clean the dishes and we don't get an allowance for this? I'm like, no, because if you don't clean the dishes, I'm not gonna do like all this work, and who's gonna do it? Like dishes will just stay there. So they get that concept now. So I would say just trying to be consistent, and then setting expectations ahead of time, giving them many opportunities to succeed. Not making it so hard that they can never win, because everyone wants to feel successful in their own right. So I think it's just important to realize, okay, for a 5-year-old it's going to look different than an 8-year-old, and that's going to look different than a preteen. And the same applies to a work setting, right? You're not going to give a junior level staff member the same kind of responsibilities as someone that's been there for a while, or that's a supervisor. So I think that's what I would say, is being consistent, having crucial conversations, not shying away from those, walking the talk, and then taking responsibilities for yourself. If you made a mistake, like accepting that for your kids and going back to them and apologizing. We have to kind of let our pride and ego put that aside. It's okay to apologize to your kids.
Yeah, I love that, taking ownership when you made the wrong decisions, both on executive settings, and I love the analogy. I use the same way sometimes when my kids ask me something, and I say, well, I empower you. Make the executive decision. You make the decision what you want to do, what you feel is right. And I love the similarities between the two. I think there's a lot to be said. So let me change topic real quick. You mentioned that you built one of the first programs around health and wellness, around specifically for the technical staff. What triggered that? And you mentioned it was a great success. What can you pinpoint why was it a success?
Sure. The trigger was my own journey in wellness, and since I was in both, I was a leader in cyber and technology, and I can feel myself getting stressed out and burnt out and overwhelmed. Not only from a personal perspective, but also from a work perspective. I knew, and I saw the similar issues across the board. People were getting sick. They were taking a lot of. They would have to leave just because the work was so stressful. And I really wanted to do something. Like I wanted to blend all the different aspects of me together. And then I also wanted to find a way to help technology and cyber leaders out there, not just leaders, but emerging leaders and just all staff, build morale and also prioritize their health and wellness. And this was before COVID. So my youngest is 6 or almost 6 now. So this was, well before COVID, where people weren't really looking at health and wellness as a priority. It's like, yeah, I'll get to it, or, I don't have time to exercise or go to the gym, or it's not just physical exercise. It's also, do you spend time in, meditating, or do you really go within? Do you have, do you reflect on your life or anything like that? Do you set aside time for yourself? And most people weren't, and, guilty as charged. Like I wasn't either until this this event happen. And like you pointed out earlier, I didn't want people to get that phone call from their wait until they get a phone call saying, oh, you really need to, prioritize your health, or have something happen where maybe it might be too late. So I wanted to figure out a way to how do I get people to understand or bring that awareness to people that unless you are well within, like, you can't lead well, because it comes from within you. So if you're not happy, if you're not in peace, if you don't feel healthy, and if you don't feel proud of yourself, then it's impossible for you to show that to somebody else or to empower others. And as a leader, that's your primary goal, is to empower other leaders as well. So when I first, brought up the idea to my supervisor at the time, they were understanding, and they thought it was a good idea. But of course, they're like, okay, well, you can do that in your own time. There's no resources, there's no funding, and as long as it doesn't affect your normal position, then we're fine with it. So it was more of a, yes, you have our permission to go ahead, but no one's really going to help you with this, which I fully expected. So I'm like, okay, great. As long as I have the permission, like I will figure out what I need to do. And so I took all of the skills I learned. I do feel like everything prepares you for like the next step in life. So if you're going through a challenging period right now, I think for everyone out there, just know it's preparing you for your future. And you can take all of these lessons with you. So all the childhood traumas that I had to overcome, and then this wellness journey I had to overcome, set me up to create this program there, because I started with teaching workshops on my own. So I created flyers and put that out there, sent emails, and then I, blocked a 1 hour chunk of time during lunch. I think I called it Wellness Wednesdays, and everyone's calendar. So this is across the entire organization. It wasn't just for the technology stuff. And little by little, and I just started teaching it on my own. Like, okay, I'm going to teach a quick, like 10-minute, like meditation. And the one thing that I started really doing in my own practices and my courses and the book that I wrote is, I knew as a working parent, even if you have two parents, you don't have 45 minutes in the day to set aside time and do a yoga session or meditation or even maybe go to the gym. And I know I didn't. So I had to find ways to incorporate mind, body, energy exercises throughout the day. And I started realizing, like, oh, it has the same, if not better effect than being so stressed out and overwhelmed 23 hours a day and then just doing something for like 1 hour, because it's what you do most that counts. So I started creating like 2-3 minute, 5 minute routines. And then I just, set aside 5 minutes every hour and to do those. And I noticed I had a lot more energy. I had, when you have a lot more energy, then you feel like you have more time on your hands as well. So it's really, I learned it's all about energy management, not time management. So I started bringing these techniques to the program at work, and so everyone started practicing those, and just simple things. It's you don't have to set aside a space and time. You can just put it on your calendar, like at the end of every hour. Just put a 5 minute block that you can just look out the window, go for a quick 5 minute walk, or just stop looking at your computer, do something different, and started picking up speed. And I think little by little, other institutes within my organization started also wanting to join. So, and now it just runs by itself. So it was a great experience.
And Jothi, let me ask you this. You glance over it, but again, from my experience in knowing people, I would say 9 out of 10 people that will get the feedback that you receive from their management would just abandon the whole idea, just move on. And I'll let it sink for a second. Why it did not happen with you? Why you decided to pursue it anyway?
So, great question. I think when you grew when you grow up getting no for an answer right from when you're a kid, it's almost like a challenge. It's like, oh, okay, all right, they're just saying no right now, but that just means I haven't done my job in asking the right question and then producing like the right amount of justification. So like I contribute a lot of who I am today to my childhood. Like I knew if I had to go to my mom and ask for anything, the answer was going to be no. Even if it's something good, like, oh, could I study more? She'll probably say no just because it was a question, it was a request. So I'm like, okay, so I need to approach this. I need to be really strategic and then, go in there with a story because everyone likes a good story, especially when you can paint the story to show how it's going to benefit them. Right. So if you have a request and it's all about you, well, I need more money because I want to do this and blah, blah, and blah. Like, yeah, you can almost guarantee the answer is going to be no. But if you go in there with a good enough story, like, okay, I'm trying to create this program, it's for the benefit of the staff and for the leadership and teaching them ways to be more effective and successful in their roles. So that would like reduce, burnout in staff and less time off of work and things like that. They're like, oh, I mean, why would you say no to that? And then I'm not asking for any money, it's like, I got this. And that's the part that I had to figure out, for myself. Like, okay, well, I can do it for free. And then I can reach out to like my own wellness network and which I did and see who's willing to kind of offer maybe like an initial set of free sessions and kind of work with me. So their name and their company gets out there as well. So what's the benefit for them, right? It's like, oh, well, hey, you can, I can put your bio out there and your company. So if someone wants to individually reach out to you to get the, whatever, healing or therapy that they want, they can. So I had to kind of make it a win-win for all parties until they started realizing the true like effect of it. And then it was kind of a no-brainer. They're like, oh, so then I said, okay, hey, my wellness staff is only, or professionals that I work with are only willing to offer this many sessions for free. After that, like it's not going to be free anymore, but it's a very nominal, charge. So it's not like it's going to cost them an arm and a leg. So I think that's the key that we can really take in any profession and in any situation, like being able to tell the story in a way that you can paint the outcome, a positive outcome for the other party. It's not just about yourself. And then show them, really don't give them a reason to say no, because essentially they didn't say no. If they had said no, I would kind of take it as okay, well, what did I do wrong? Or okay, I would just take a no as a temporary no. And I think that's the key that I tell my kids in life. Like, it's a no for now, and take that as, okay, you need to come back to me with a proper justification. Like, why should I do this for you? What is it? How is that going to benefit the family or and put it in that way, just to kind of start teaching them young, like stop thinking of yourself, like put the other person, especially if you're asking for something from another person, you need to put the other person first and then almost don't give them a reason to say no.
It sounds like, especially in the corporate environment, sometimes it's not no because it's, I guess politically incorrect. So they just say, well, hold on for a second, maybe we should do this or not now, or, well, we have to go through these things first. And it sounds like two principles. One is that a no for you is just the fact that you didn't ask the question the right way and it didn't justify enough. That's number one. And then the second thing is is that you do first and ask for forgiveness later.
And you have to be careful with that, right? Like if you use it all the time, then you won't really be given the opportunity to do that. So I think once you've built up a certain reputation and trust and rapport, and you've shown you have proven success to all of your ideas, I think you could use that limitedly. If it's something, especially if it's something crucial that you don't have the time to really go through this whole process with, like, hey, I had to make a decision on the fly, and I'll apologize later. And I think that's understandable. But if you use it all the time, everything in moderation.
And tell me, you had to build this program from scratch, and you don't necessarily, you're an engineer by profession. You had the background, the cybersecurity background. You've like a self-taught problem solver, but you don't necessarily come from the health and wellness world. I guess just professionally speaking, how would you? And it's a really big task. Again, it's like, where did you go first? How did you figure out? You defined the problem because you had the problem, but then you're trying to find a solution, and the solution wasn't something that you was naturally coming to you, not from a background perspective and so on. How did you go about
Right.
figure things out?
So I do believe when you ask, the answers will come. So even from when I was given this situation in my wellness, the surgeons will always say, "Oh yeah, you need all these surgeries," without really any guaranteed result. So I knew what I didn't want, which helped me try to figure out, well, what do I want? So I knew I did not want to put myself in under multiple surgeons' hands again. That's what I didn't want. But then I was given 6 weeks to live. So I was like, okay. And again, this is another situation where most people would have looked at that 6 weeks and thought, oh, this is the end of the world, and this is how my life's going to end. But I looked at it as like, okay, well, I will take that 6 weeks and I'm going to figure something out. And if I don't figure something out, then I will come back and get the surgeries and see what happens. But I knew in my mind, like, okay, I will figure something out. And then I just started doing a whole lot of research, okay, what do are natural techniques, natural modalities, like, things like that. And little by little things would, come up, and I would go try them. And the one thing I even learned in this process is certain things only work for a certain amount of time, and that's okay. It doesn't mean like that's it, now you have to go backward. And it took me a while to get to that understanding. So I would try a certain modality, it would take me so far, and then it would plateau. And then that just, I learned like, okay, well, I need to find another modality then. And then I would do that for a little bit of time, and that would take me so far. So little by little, I was improving. So I had to teach myself to look at the bigger picture and not what's happening today. So like, okay, well, from 3 months ago till this point in time, here's how much I've improved, and through multiple different modalities. Okay, now it's just time that I need to find something else. And, just do research, put your stories out there. I think that's the number one thing I would say. Is a lot of people want to keep things within them and not say anything. But if I did that, I probably wouldn't be here today. So I, started telling my friends, or I'm like, hey, this is a situation I'm facing, but I'm trying these things. And then somebody, you'll hear something like, oh, well, I heard of this acupuncture technique. Like, maybe you should look into that. And I would never say no to anything. I would, keep my mind open, as well as my options. And little by little, I started healing, and things take time sometimes. Like, good things don't happen overnight, usually. So it did take a good 3 years to really heal 100%. But I looked at it as progress, not because I had no idea when I'm going to heal 100%. But if I looked at that, like, oh, this is taking too long, let me just get the surgeries, then who knows what would have happened with those. So the same thing with the wellness program. Yeah, I had no idea how to start it, but it's like, okay, well, what do I need to do? Okay, maybe, first of all, I need to figure out, like, who's going to teach, these workshops? Like, how long should they be? How do I bring in the awareness to the staff, because they might be like, oh, we don't need this. So when you see the potential in something and nobody else does, it's difficult to bring that out of them. But I know what worked for me. So all of these different modalities took a lot of time, and that's the one thing I knew. People don't have that kind of time on their hands, and neither did I. So I started mixing all of these different techniques together. And then, like I said before, I started just doing them like 5 minutes, like, throughout the day. And I noticed that had a much better effect than being stressed out, all day long, and then trying to dedicate like 45 minutes at the end of the day. Because when you're in a state of chaos, like, that's when you need a way to keep yourself calm and collected. right? It's not when you do like a 45-minute exercise or going to the gym, that's great. You feel great for that period of time, but then you come back to a world of chaos. So are you able to transfer all of that positive energy into your existing world? And those are the techniques I started developing for myself, and then I started teaching others.
And I'm sure that you had doubts along the way, no? I mean, it can be that you're like every day you were like, oh yeah, I'm right on the right path. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm getting there little by little, as you mentioned. But did you ever, there were points where you wanted to abandon the whole thing or said, okay, I'm just, I'm getting nowhere? Because again, it's just, people always see the end results, but they don't see how long it took and or what kind of effort or what kind of doubts were along the way.
Yes, for sure. I mean, there's always fears in anything new that you do, or fear of the unknown. Because I didn't know. I mean, even within that 6 weeks, I just knew that what I didn't want, and I knew what I wanted, but I don't know exactly how to do it, or even if it's gonna work. And people thought I was crazy. Including my own family, because like, well, you're going against the doctors, but you're not a doctor and you don't know anything about it. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I'm not a doctor, but who botched my C-section? That was a doctor, right? So, if I put my hands in a person who was a professional, and if she made such a drastic, a quote unquote mistake, then, I'm going to figure something out. And yeah, I didn't have 100% confidence in myself that I am going to figure something out, but I think the amount, the weight of what I didn't want, over, it was kind of over like what I really did want. So I'm like, okay, I really don't want to get multiple surgeries because who knows what's going to happen with those. So I need to do something. And it's also not giving up on what you do want. And I think all entrepreneurs would say the same thing. If you want to start a business, there are going to be days that you just want to give up. Like, it's just not worth it. Maybe I should just stick with a 9-to-5 job. And same in wellness too. And so I think it applies to all aspects of life. But if you really do want something and you truly believe in it, and you need to be 100%, you need to kind of also think about the why. Especially if you want a business, right? If you're an entrepreneur, then you have to think about, like, why do you want this business? Is it just to make money, or are you really passionate about, what you're doing in the business, and what you're doing, who are the end customers, and what are you doing for them? And if you're 100% on that, there are always going to be days where like, oh, it's just hard. It may not seem worth it, but you always have to kind of go back to the why. And my why in my own journey was I wanted to be 100%, to be there for my kids, for myself. I want to do a lot in this world and in my lifetime. So I'm like, oh, I can't die. Like that's like, I have too much to, like, I have so much that I want to, conquer and put out there, for the world. And I think every time something would stop working, yeah, you do feel like a setback, like, oh, like I thought this was going to carry me through. Like now stop working. But it's just kind of having some grace for yourself. Like it's okay. You're on the right, it's almost a lot of affirmations, like telling yourself, yeah, you are on the right path. You didn't choose the easiest path. And when you don't choose the easiest path, like it is going to be challenging, and not giving up, always going back to the why, and just almost visualizing the outcome of, oh, if I achieve this, like what does that look like, and what does that feel like, and trying to bring that type of energy and feelings to the moment, even before you have it.
And Jothi, why do you think that now is becoming front and center? I mean, we've been hearing about burnout in the workplace, specifically for cybersecurity professionals, combined with all kinds of things we hear, like, quiet quitting, quiet hiring, quiet everything. Like, it just seems like there's just this almost animosity between employers and employees, and it's almost it's 2023. Why are we not? Why is wellness in the workplace not even like a thing collectively that's been around for 20 years? Why now? I mean, this is fairly not new. We've always known of people getting burnt out. We see that different professions, from dentists to lawyers to, like how many recovering lawyers you hear about. There's a lot of recovering cybersecurity professional people that went from pen testing to something else because of burnt out. So why now? Why all of a sudden the awareness?
I think COVID brought a lot to light that was underneath the surface before, which is also why you see relationships, not working out, or the highest number of divorce rates. I think it really gave people a moment to step back and look at their life. Am I doing the right thing here? Is my career or money or success, is that more important than my wellness? And when I say wellness, happiness also has a different meaning today than it did before. And success, because before, it's like, okay, you grow up, you get married, you have kids, you have like the white picket fence, you have a dog, and your kids are in activities, they're going to the best schools, and it truly was like the keeping up with the Joneses type of feeling, and that was a sign of success. And I think the younger generation, especially these days, the millennials, if they, as they went through COVID, you see a lot of millennials like, well, I'm not going after the highest paying job per se, because that doesn't guarantee my happiness. I would rather go for the job that offers the most flexibility. You don't have to do 9 to 5. Like, you can do flexible hours. You don't have to come into work every day. Maybe you can work remotely or telework. And I truly think COVID was a blessing in disguise, because for myself, you lived your life by default versus by design. And I think through COVID, people really wanting to live like, I want to live my life by design. I want to design my life. And hey, if a certain company or organization is not, we add value to the organization the same way the organization adds value to our life. So if there isn't that match, then okay, I'll find something else. Versus before, especially like my parents' generation, you take a job and you stick with it for 30 years and then you never leave until you retire. So I think every generation, like, they're evolving and growing and really focusing on what makes them happy. It's not just all about the money. It's not all about prestige. The definition of success is, totally different. And especially now, and I can just really quick story. I mean, my previous boss just retired, and it really felt that her work was her life was her work, and because of that, her family suffered. Because the higher you go, the more time you're spending on your work. Especially in that generation, and her family had to wait 30 years for her to retire to really, have her spend time with them and just allow herself to just be free and travel and things like that. And I know that's not me. And I know the younger generation now, like, that would never be them. I think they would always, look at, even the term life work balance is doesn't exist anymore, because work is part of your life, but so is other parts of your life. So it's all the question of, like, how are you balancing all parts of your life, like your social circles, your self-care, your wellness, your exercise, your money, like, how are we balancing all the different aspects together? I think that's really where the world's going.
And how then, Jothi, do you design for the life you want, not the life you have? I think a lot of people are listening to this and say, well, it's easier said than done. You are, well educated, you have a lot of experience, you're highly sought after, you have a lot going for you, you're in a position to be a designer for the life you want. Some people may or may not be in a position like that. What would you say to that?
You can always design the life that you want. You may not always be able to have all the aspects of the life that you want all in one shot, but I would say prioritize. There's a Japanese model called the Ikigai, I believe is what it's called, and it talks about all the different parts of your life. And yes, you may not be at a position where you feel like all the parts are balanced and is exactly the design that you want. Because guess what? Once you have something, you're always looking for like the next thing, right? So you're never going to be in a position where everything's perfect and everything's, exactly the way you designed it, and you never have to do anything again. Because that just means you're living in comfort zone. And in which case you're not growing or evolving. So there's always going to be parts of your life that you feel like, oh, I could design it better there, but I don't have, maybe it's not the highest priority right now. Let's say social circles. You might feel like, okay, well, I feel like I designed my career, my social circle, or my health, my wellness. But then maybe I really need to expand on my soul tribe, or get people that I associate with people that I feel like that rejuvenated energy. And yeah, you might not be able to spend as much time as you want with them, but maybe you could find ways to incorporate them into your lifestyle, or just dedicate time. Like, I have a soul group of people that maybe I would love to meet them every week, but my life doesn't really accommodate that right now. Okay, well, maybe I meet them once a month, and then maybe we set up phone calls once a week instead. So there's always ways to go about it. If you're in a career that you're not 100% happy with, or you feel like it's not the way you would design it, can you bring happiness to your workplace? There's always ways to do things that can make something that doesn't feel so great feel much better. Let's say you're doing laundry. I mean, who loves to do laundry, and who would design their life that they have to do laundry? You love doing laundry?
I hate folding, but I do love doing laundry.
Oh, folding. Yeah, that's what I meant. Folding laundry. I mean, yeah.
Laundry is not a problem. It's the folding part that
The
I really
folding
don't
laundry.
like.
Right. So, okay, well, yeah, it's not going to fulfill my happiness, but well, what if I just throw on some dance music in the meantime? Okay, well then, can I make it a little bit more exciting and design that part of it at least? Or maybe I do it in batches. Like, no one said I have to sit here for 2 hours folding laundry. Like, okay, well, I'm gonna fold like this set of clothes for the next 20 minutes while I throw on some dance music. Then I'm gonna go do something else and then come back to it. So if you feel like you're not able to design something that you don't have the ownership of, like your organization, then which parts of it can you design? If you love coffee, well, can you bring in coffee to your workplace, and that will kind of put you in a better mood or give you more energy? Can you listen to music while you're working? So, you know, try to find the parts that you do have control over, and that you can design, and then little by little start focusing on all the other areas.
And what can you tell employers that want to align themselves with that movement, that trend? Because that trend is not going to stop, I don't think. I think you're right. I think COVID and, that people understand the work-life balance is not really a thing, and waiting 30 years for retirement, that's not a thing either. How can employers align themselves, not just from a health and wellness perspective, but just overall providing the environment that employees like to be with and be part of?
Yeah, we are doing that as we speak, and it's a big process and topic out there, like the future of the workforce. what is the right thing to do? Is it a hybrid environment? Is it all remote? Is it all on site, which I don't think will ever happen again, unless for very dedicated professions. Like if you have to go in and build something, then yeah, you have to go in. But I think all organizations are forced to look at employee wellness and the future of the workforce very differently now, and really understand that an employee is going to work the best where they feel comfortable working and where they feel safe and where they feel wanted and needed and valued, and seen. So you could come into the workplace, but if you still feel like nobody sees you or nobody values you, you're still going to do, maybe not your best work, which could be the same as when you're at home. So I think it's really important for employers and organizations to really look at things from a holistic viewpoint. It's not just from a performance or producing a standpoint, which is how it was before. Okay, are you delivering things on time? Are you performing these tasks on time? Are you producing what you need to produce? And those are still things that need to be done. But the how you get there, the mindset has completely changed. You don't have to, I know before when I asked for additional telework days, it was regarded as like, oh, well, people don't work while they're at home. So we need you on site. And I'm like, okay, well, if I'm not working when I'm at home, like what makes you think I'm working when I'm on site? So it's also the mindset of, I think there might have been there's always a couple people or, a set amount of minority people that may not really produce in any environment, but that doesn't mean that you punish the entire, everybody else for those set of people. And
maybe
right.
Those are the wrong people to begin with.
Exactly. And that's really an important point, because just because somebody is not being productive or producing in a certain environment, doing a certain job, there's a lot of judgment on that person, right? Oh, well, that person is like, they're terrible, and you start creating like a negative opinion about them. But maybe it's just not the right fit. And unless someone gives them an opportunity, like, well, you know what, maybe you should try this other type of work instead, and that could be their thing that totally changes how they operate. And I do that with my kids again, bringing the same concepts in the home front. Like my son loves cleaning the floor, and he'll do it in his own way. Like he'll take a couple paper towels, put it on the floor, and he'll kind of like start ice skating with it and making it his own thing. Like again, designing a task the way that he loves to do it, and everything will be great. But if I try to tell him to fold his laundry, it would take him forever, like sitting there complaining and whining, and it's more of a headache for me to like, oh my God, I gotta listen to this. So I'm like, you know what? Why don't you stick with what you are actually good at in cleaning the floors? And my daughter is good at like decorating and things like that. Which I think brings us to this other topic of, I was always taught that you should focus on your weaknesses and try to get better at those. But I've learned over the years, you should focus on your strengths and then get really good at those. And, not to forget about your weaknesses, but understand like, okay, they are your weaknesses, but it doesn't mean you have to now make that your job to become better at your weaknesses. I would just focus on your strengths, because that's what's going to get you to the life that you can truly design.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been absolutely fascinating. I feel like we can go on for at least double, and we have to do a part B of this conversation. I feel like we're just trying to get warmed up. But before I let you go, and I really appreciate the time today. I know you were super busy. Let me ask you this: Do you find that all of that, changing the workforce, these health and wellness requirements, and then the emergence of AI and chat GPT and all these robots that potentially can displace us, would that accelerate potentially? Because you don't need a health and wellness program for a robot. They don't take time off. They do what they're told. They can work 24/7. And they may, at the beginning, the cost will be prohibitive. But again, if you don't have to pay somebody all those wellness days, take off day, I mean, all kinds of stuff. There's just like COVID, accelerated the digital transformation. Can the movement of just kind of, getting the workplace, design, life design, all that stuff will accelerate the adoption of AI by companies?
AI is already there and it's just going to keep growing just like cybersecurity. So I think it's just something that we need to prepare for. And there is a place for that. I wouldn't say it's going to replace every single person in the workplace because there are certain positions where you need that human interaction and that social interaction. But there are also tasks that can be done, like the more mundane tasks that previously might have, there was a human doing it, but it's like the same thing day in, day out. I think those are tasks that can truly be automated. And I know we're already looking at that in the technology and cyberspace. I am still very concerned about AI having its own personality because, like you said, robots may not need wellness, but there's lots of proof out there that there's certain robots that are kind of having its own mindset and its own personality. So, something to look out for.
Absolutely, and I like the positive note. And what easiest way, Jothi, to get in touch with you, to know more about what you've done for the Healthful Wellness Program, for coaching, whatever the case may be?
Sure. So I have my website. It's jothidugar.com, JOTHIDUGAR.com, or I'm also on LinkedIn. You can just search for The Chaos Guru or by my name, and those are probably the two easiest ways to contact me.
Absolutely amazing. And you've done a really phenomenal job answering my completely unscripted conversation. This was really great. And for all those who joined, thanks very much for taking the time to listen today. And looking forward to hearing the next episode. And until then, stay safe. Online is offline as well. Thank you, Jothi, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.